So it's my mother's birthday on May 7th. And so I record my talk because it's always a couple days before her birthday, because it's the cheapest gift I can give her. And she's hands down the greatest, one of the greatest people in my life. Because without her, and she's come to these talks before, and my wife says I don't acknowledge her enough, but without my mother's support and cheerleading, I would absolutely not be here. So, again, my name is Michael. I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder in 1994. So I've been dealing with this now. I celebrated 22 years this past April. And I say celebrated because it was the greatest thing that could have ever happened to me. Because it gave me an understanding that there's something actually going on, and therefore it could be addressed, right? I would have felt crazy if I went in and described what I was feeling, and they're like, "You're fine." That's worse, I can assure you. And so I just want to apologize ahead of time for the family, the younger family in the room, because my language is usually coarse. And I've been told ahead of time to kind of trim it down. But I'm going to give you the quick version of how I got through my youngerish years so I could really recap on what I went through last year. But basically, I was diagnosed when I was 17 years old, and I was diagnosed with attention deficit disorder. And so I was given Ritalin. And that's basically the worst solution to someone that suffers from mania. It's kind of like just turning me on high and letting me go and do whatever I wished. And so we learned within about 3 months, and very uncontrollable behavior, including having my license taken away for speeding and an inability to sit still and always constantly disappearing and being asked to leave high school, that I probably had a different diagnosis. And so they decided to come back and say, well, you have, your bipolar disorder really focuses on the mania side than the depressive side. And a lot of people out there are like, man, that's the winning bipolar. Right? I mean, who the hell wants to wake up every day sad if you can wake up every day fired up? And I'll explain to you what it's like to try and sustain that level of energy, because it is exhausting. I'll actually give you guys an example. For anyone not suffering with a diagnosis, this is the greatest example I can give you, and I have no political preference whatsoever. Okay? So, Trump becomes the potential respective nominee. Okay? And many of you in this room jumped out of their chairs and started cheering. And I did not, but if I had, I would have jumped out of my chair. And when you sat down because you've now experienced the emotion, I would have continued standing for the next 3 days. Okay? So if everyone can put in their mind what it's like to feel that energy and then not have it go anywhere, that's mania for me. Depression works the same. You get the same news and you feel terrible. And you come back. And I feel terrible for a week. And I can't explain why. And I can't explain it, right? Why do you feel this way? Because I do. That's it. It's just going on. And so that is the life I experience. If everyone oscillates on a regular scale of 5 is positive and -5 is negative, I hit 17 and then 2 and then -8 and then 12. And as Leon put up on the board, he calls it the recovery line. Relapse, remission, recovery. I call that Monday. Right? Because that's what it's like sometimes. After my diagnosis, I was thrown out of high school, They determined that it was better for me to leave halfway through. I still got my diploma, but they wrote me a letter from the superintendent saying the school, Michael exceeds the offerings of the school, so we're going to allow him to go home at 11 o'clock to cause no further disruption. And I got a diploma. I then graduated, and I went to University of Massachusetts, and I went for approximately 20 minutes. I was there for a semester. And then I did what usual normal people do at 17, 18 years old. I transferred to where my girlfriend was going to school, and I picked up and moved. And so I showed up at SUNY Binghamton, and I was there for about 40 minutes because I was hired as the youngest teaching assistant in the history of SUNY Binghamton, and I taught computer science. My second semester there, I was the youngest teaching assistant in the history of SUNY Binghamton to be expelled, and I was sent home. And so now I'm in my third semester of school, and I call my mom up, and I'm like, Mom, I'm going to need you to come get me. She's like, well, Michael, the semester's going to be over soon. I'll come get you when the semester's over, and we'll talk about school. I'm like, Mom, I just want to push this out there. I'm homeless at the moment. The cops have moved everything out of the dorm, and I'm now just sitting on a stoop. So if you could speed that timeline up and maybe come get me now, I'm going to appreciate that. And I said to her after she picked me up, and I'll tell you, this is why she's a saint. She looked at me, and I looked back at her just straight-faced, and I'm like, Mom, I'm not talking about what happened. So don't ask me. It's better for both of us for you not to know what I've gone through. She didn't ask a single question. And then I get home. And so now I have like almost 3 semesters under my belt, and I go to sleep, and I wake up the next morning, and my mom shows up in my room, and she's chipper and happy and upbeat. And she says, Michael, you don't have to go back to college right now. I'm thinking to myself, I don't even want to leave this room right now. I'm glad college is your next goal. And she said, you are simply not staying here and doing nothing. And the most supportive thing she did as a parent was eliminate all expectations and simply give me a manageable task. Go do something. And so I got a job, and I took summer classes at a local university in New Jersey, and I then transferred to Rutgers, the State University of New Jersey. And I was there for 80 minutes because I actually stayed 4 semesters and got a degree in computer science. And I remember living with a close buddy of mine from high school, and he would come into my room on a Thursday, and he's like, where have you been? I'm like, I've been right here. I'm like, what day is it? He's like, it's Thursday. I said, okay, well, what's wrong? He's like, the last time I saw you was Monday. Where have you been for 4 days? I'm like, your guess is as good as mine. Because I would just go, you know. If my buddies thought it was a good idea to go to the casino on Monday night, I'd get in the car at 12 o'clock at night and drive to the casino and sleep on the beach or sleep in my car and gamble for 3 days. It didn't matter. I was just unstoppable. And at this time, I was exclusively self-medicating. And self-medicating in 2 forms. 1, I would drink a lot, and 2, I would save up my meds and try and catch up. So for all of us that are not doctors, that model doesn't work. It's actually terrible. It fails. So now I graduate college, and I get a job at AT&T Bell Labs. And I'm working there for 3 or 4 months, and I go into my manager. I'm like, I'm going to need you to double my salary. Because if you can't double my salary, I'm leaving. He's like, we can't double your salary. I don't understand what the question was. I'm like, fine, I'm leaving. So I left, and I applied for another job, and I ended up quadrupling my salary. But I got tied. I had a company that now knew how to take advantage of mental illness, right? Because I could work 20 hours a day, and I'm a pretty smart guy. So you got a smart guy working 20 hours a day, and he's motivated by compensation. Well, holy shit. I mean, that's a racehorse that doesn't stop racing. I mean, that is the longest race in the world. And so I did that for 2 years, and at the end of that 2 years, I bought a house. And so now I'm 22, 23 years old. I bought a house. I'm in great shape. And a week later, I quit my job because I didn't like my job anymore. And I really wasn't that insightful to think, oh, I just bought a house. I should probably keep my job. So I started a company. And I started a company and lost all my money. And so now I have a house and health insurance and all of this, and I don't have a job and I've lost all my money. And I go and I find my way out to Michigan, and I find a client and I say, listen, I need you to hire me, and I need to be paid for the year right now. And I'm going to stick around for 12 months. And the guy gives me a check. And so I've always learned that, my psychologist from back in the day, he's like, Michael, he's like, it's amazing that you always land on your feet. He then said, it's amazing the number of times you leave your feet, because this is outrageous. And so I get here, I moved to Michigan in 2001, I gain 150 pounds. I do what most logical people do upon moving to a new state and gaining 150 pounds, I get married to someone I knew for 4 months. Because at that point, I'm unmedicated, and I just need to keep creating chaos. Because the more chaos I have, the busier my brain is. The busier my brain is, the less I have to think about myself, the less I have to realize I have all these problems. And so if you notice, if you continually make plans, you never have to live in the moment. You're always living at that next event. So I got married. And so that didn't work out. And I went to a doctor, and the doctor said at 26 years old, your liver is completely fatty, you're drinking your random medication style, everything, you will be dead at 32. It's like, you got to lose 100 pounds. And so that's in January. In June, I go back, and I had lost 155 pounds. And I said, okay, what's next? And the doctor just kind of stares at me. He's like, I've been doing this forever. I've never had anyone come back. So I really don't know what to do here. Right, you were a one visit guy. He's like, so here's the deal. You can't have your excess skin removed. You got to wait and exercise and do that. So I scheduled the surgery, and I had my skin removed 6 months later. I was very busy from 2004 to 2008. And I then get divorced, right? So now I'm divorced, and I get remarried. And so now I'm married to my current wife, who is also my savior and the patron saint of married to me. And at that point, I had met her, but I knew her a month. And we started dating, and we dated for 3 years, and now I'm married with 2 kids and a very stable life. And I wanted to share that with you because I give a lot of talks. I give a lot of public talks. I own my own business. I have 35 employees, right? I have the house. I have the cars. I have the kids, right? I have what people would consider to be, like, I want what that guy has. I spend most nights lying in bed staring at the ceiling, wondering when I'm going to have what that guy has. I struggle with such self-doubt and fear and worry that I'm able to stand in front of a room and make a group laugh. And when I leave here, I feel like crap because I don't know how to do that. Now, it's not as extreme lately, because marrying my wife was the greatest thing that could have ever happened to me. April 13th was my birthday. I'm not concerned if most of you didn't bring gifts. But I overdosed on my birthday in 2009. And I'm on the phone with my psychologist. And I go silent, and my psychologist says, "What are you doing?" I'm like, I just can't stand it. The racing thoughts, I cannot stand the racing thoughts anymore. I've just taken all my pills. he's like, well, now we got to send an ambulance for you because you can't do that. So he's like, you got to stay on the phone with me. He calls, sends an ambulance to my house. I get taken to the hospital. And I am so fired up in the hospital that I overdosed on benzos. And so those are your, take as needed anxiety meds. And you're not allowed to do that. And so I did it, and now I show up at the hospital, and I'm all fired up. I start taking my clothes off. And the hospital's like, sir, there's curtains here for that. I'm like, I don't give a shit. I know what I look like. And the nurse is like, sir, it's for the other patients. This is not for you. And so I just want to share the hope that I have, because literally 7 years ago, I was sitting in a room with clothes and shoes without laces, throwing around a beach ball to other people and drawing pictures of sailboats. Okay? I was that guy. It means absolutely nothing. Right? There's no stigma attached to it. It's simply a reset. It was a reset for me because I was doing stupid things outside of the reset area. And they sent me home 6 days later, and I got home and I looked around and I was like, they did not prepare me for this. I don't know what to do in this world where there's no rules. I drove myself back to the hospital. I'm like, I'm staying. They kept me for another 4 days. But I'll tell you, during the time I was in the hospital, to give you an idea of why my brain doesn't always work right, I'm making deals with clients. I'm selling things, okay? Because there's a phone in the little waiting room if you do it at Beaumont. There's a computer there. I'm selling software and making deals. My partner's like, what do you do? You got to stop. And it's the thrill of the chase. I don't care if I could deliver it. It's the thrill of the next thing. And so I got out and, I want to just speed up, and I'll just tell you about last year. I am now medication stable, which means my wife puts my medications in a little box. I take 17 pills a day, and of the 14 available pills, I take most of the time 14, right? 14 little boxes, morning, evening. I probably take 13. Not because I don't want to, but because for some odd reason I can't remember. Last April, the pharmacy sends me half the dose of my antidepressant. But it still says the same thing on the vial, so I just continue taking it. And I don't realize it. And I start to feel wonky, but not enough to think anything's up. So it's April, May, June, July. July, I come back from vacation, and now I'm suicidal. And so now I want to die every day. And I'm thinking something's now gone terribly wrong. Where I now have friends showing up at my house in August because I'm texting, if I didn't have kids and a wife, I'd kill myself right now because there's no reason. And I'm driving to sales calls, and I'm crying hysterically, and I'm talking to my business partner. He's like, where are you going? Like, what's going on here? I'm like, I'm going to a sales call. He's like, well, why don't you just take the day off? I said, because I don't know any better. I know habit. I have to do this. I know that this feeling is going to pass. The only thing I've learned in 21 years, the good feelings pass as quickly as the bad ones do. It's going to pass. I get to the sales call. He's like, are you going to go in there crying? I'm like, if that's what they're buying, shit, I'll start crying. But I come out, and I literally, for 2 months, I have to walk through this hand-holding of my partner until I'm back on track. And I'm not shameful. It's not shameful. It's what I have to do. But the thing I want to tell you is Blue Cross Blue Shield, my doctor wants to change my medicines, and Blue Cross Blue Shield now comes to me and says that it's a tier 3 medication or a tier 1 or whatever tier I'm not supposed to easily get. It's one of those tiers. And they said it's $2,000 a month for you to take this medication. I'm like, well, that's nonsense. My doctor calls. They say there's an override process. They don't override it for 5 days. I'm in my psychiatrist's office. He calls, and he gets stonewalled by the pharmacy department on not being able to move further. And while I'm sitting there, I look up Blue Cross Blue Shield CEO. His number's got to be out there. I call his office. And I said, well, I'm calling the CEO because he needs to know who I am. And they said, well, sir, we have customer service channels for that. I said, well, he's going to want to know who I am sooner than that. Your customer service channels are failing. And I said, you have a medication that you're not approving, and I'm going to kill myself right now. So maybe you have somebody that'll talk to me. In 1 minute, I had somebody on the phone. That woman said to me, let me look up your member number, let me look this up. She gets down to it, and she says, I need to put you on hold for 1 minute. Comes right back, she says, sir, you've been approved. You've been approved until 2099. And I'm like, well, there you go. This person actually just gave me a death sentence. I'm now going to live 123 years. Because God's out there, he's like, listen, I'm going to have this guy go through the refill process one last time. Then I'm going to get him. But anyway, the reason I tell you this story is you got to advocate for yourself. There's nothing you shouldn't do for yourself to get the answers you need, and you should call whoever you need to call. But bottom line is, I've recovered. I do this every day. I created an app that helps support me live through gratitude and spirituality and mindfulness. I believe in leaving everything I've experienced for a day in the garage, right? Because if you think about it this way, when I pull in and I open that door, my wife and kids don't deserve anything that I got during the day. I don't want them to give me their shit. I shouldn't give them my shit. It's a fair deal, right? And so my relationship's so much better because I check it at the door. I do these things because I have to. And so I say I'm grateful for my diagnosis. I'm celebrating my diagnosis because the colors I see are brighter, the sounds I hear are crisper, and God has given me the opportunity to work on myself every single day I'm alive. That is fantastic. The final thing I'll say, and I promise I'm going to turn it over. Weight gain. I've gained 155 pounds twice in my life. I've lost it twice in my life. I've taken medications the entire time. The only thing that has ever caused weight gain in my life is a fork. Because I've been on lots and lots of medicines. And I'm on medicine right now, and this year I'm doing it for my third time, not because I want to, because I have to. I'm down 45 pounds since January 4th. And everything is possible. So, thank you very much.